Hello and welcome to English 1101. Professor Mark Dawson. I'm going to be going over patterns for college writing. The chapter 14 under Argumentation. This discusses how to write an argumentative essay. I've assigned it as reading. I'm going to go over most of this chapter so you can get a sense of what I'll be looking for later and what makes a good argumentative essay. So in the beginning of chapter 14, it says, what is argumentation? Argumentation is a logical way of asserting the soundness of a debatable position, belief, or conclusion. Argumentation takes a stand supported by evidence and urges people to share the writer's perspective and insights. Argumentation, argumentative essays take a stand. Okay, so that means that your thesis statement should clearly state what stand you're taking. If I'm asking you, for example, if college should be free, if the essay prompt says, in so many words, it boils down to, should college be free in the United States? Okay, and that's what the argumentative essay is asking you for. Then you're either going to say that it should be free or that it shouldn't be free. And that's not going to be your entire thesis, but your thesis is going to completely make clear your position on that. So it gives an example here for the topic sentence. While the Wild Web has enabled more micro-entrepreneurs to flourish, its overall impact might seem quaint compared with the smartphone. It might seem quaint. So it might be small compared to what the smartphone has done for micro-entrepreneurs. So there's a lot being spoken there in that topic sentence, and obviously it gives you the rest of the essay. You can read it on your own, but to get a sense of what kind of topic sentence clearly takes a stand. It is not one-dimensional. This topic sentence here is not just smartphones are great. Okay, that's not a good topic sentence. All right, but it does say that while the web has enabled more micro-entrepreneurs to flourish, so small business people, its overall impact might seem quaint or be small compared with the smartphone. Meaning the smartphone has actually enabled more micro-entrepreneurs to flourish than the internet in general. Okay, so that's page 517, chapter 14 in patterns. All right, an argumentation can be used to convince other people to accept or at least acknowledge the validity of your position, to defend your position even if you cannot convince others to agree, or to question or refute a position you believe to be misguided, untrue, dangerous, or evil, without necessarily offering an alternative, but you can offer an alternative. I think this makes a good distinction between, well, I'm very persuasive. I can write an argumentative essay. There's some difference here between being persuasive or persuasion in general and argumentation that I think the book makes very clear. Just to persuade an audience, a writer relies on various kinds of appeals based on emotion, appeals based on logic, and appeals based on the character reputation of the writer. Okay, so just because you write a paper and you've got PhD and you've got a bunch of accolades doesn't necessarily mean yes, you'll write an argumentative essay, or you write an argumentative paper, take a stand on something. It doesn't always stand up to, that would be more, yes, it's persuasive because of your position, or yes, it's persuasive because of your emotion behind the argument, because you believe in this thing, or you don't believe, okay? But that's not the same as argumentation, because argumentation is the appeal of reason or logic. In an argument, a writer connects a series of statements so that they lead logically to a conclusion. If you're doing it right, and it's okay to have some emotion in your argumentative essays, but if you're doing it right, your argument is irrefutable. People can't go against it because it's based on solid ground, and that's the ground of logic. That if this, then that. And there's a lot of ways to get to that, and we'll get that as we go through the chapter. Okay, so unlike persuasion, argumentation has a formal structure. An argument makes points, supplies evidence, establishes a logical chain of reasoning, refutes opposing arguments, and accommodates the audience's views. Okay, I want to you to pay special attention to the last two that I just read. Refutes opposing arguments. What does that mean? Well, it means that you've acknowledged the other side of the argument. You've acknowledged that it exists. I understand why, like if you're using the college example, the free college example, I understand why people may think that college should be free, but here's why they're wrong. Okay, so you're acknowledging the other side and then you're refuting that. And accommodates the audience's views. An argumentative essay, you would at least take into consideration some of the opposing views, or take into consideration context. That's what that's referring to. So if you're writing an argumentative essay or giving an argumentative speech or taking a stand on something and giving a speech, and let's say it's pro-union, okay, then where would you be giving that speech? Who's your audience? And so some consideration has to be put in place for that. You wouldn't necessarily submit that article to a fashionably non-union newspaper or something, right? Because they wouldn't necessarily see your logic or publish your article. Okay, most effective arguments combine two or more appeals. Even though their primary appeal is to reason, they may also appeal to emotions. For example, you could use a combination of logical and emotional appeals to argue against lowering the drinking age in your state from 21 to 18. You could appeal to reason by constructing an argument leading to the conclusion that the state should not condone policies that have high probability of injuring or killing citizens. You should support your conclusion by presenting statistics showing that alcohol-related traffic accidents kill more teenagers than disease does. You could also cite a study showing that when the drinking age was raised from 18 to 21, fatal accidents declined. In addition, you can include an appeal to the emotions by telling a particularly poignant story about an 18-year-old alcoholic, or by pointing out how an increased number of accidents involving drunk drivers would cost some innocent people their lives, okay? And that may be how you start, is you start with a little bit of emotion, a little bit of persuasion, and then you go to the data. And the rest of your argumentative essay is based soundly in logic. Okay, let's jump over to planning an argumentative essay. Okay, so you need to choose your topic, and this is very important. This does not mean that you have to, I know this is going to sound crazy, but this doesn't mean that you have to believe in what you're writing about. If it's for a college essay or a college paper, you don't necessarily have to emotionally believe in the argument that you're making. It can help. It can also hurt you to emotionally believe in that argument. Let me give you an example. It can help you because it gives you a little more fire, okay? But just like real fire, when you're playing with emotion in an argumentative essay that's supposed to be based in logic, you can go too far, and your whole paper is then based on emotion or that fire. Okay, I've written plenty of essays throughout my college career where I actually personally thought the opposite was true in an argumentative essay or paper. Okay, it doesn't mean that my paper wasn't good. It doesn't mean that I was doing someone a disservice necessarily. Okay, because that's not, they weren't asking for, sometimes sure they're asking for your opinion, but you can go the other way if there's more evidence. All right. Other factors should also influence your selection of a topic. First, you should be well informed about your topic. Okay, how do you get well informed about something if you don't know anything about? Well, you have to do some research. You have to get enough research done so that you can first choose which side you're going to go on. Okay, and sometimes I didn't necessarily believe in the side that I chose for the argumentative essay was because I found more research on the other side. Okay, if I could like stomp on the floor right now, like, hey, if you're writing an argumentative essay and you believe a certain way, but you're not finding enough evidence to support your claim that way, then maybe you could write the essay on the other side and just have fun with it instead. Because there's more evidence on that side. If you don't do that, sometimes that emotion will take over your essay and it won't be based in logic because you don't have enough evidence to go along with it. Okay, developing a thesis. After you've chosen your topic, you're ready to state the position you will argue in the form of a thesis. Keep in mind that in an argumentative essay, your thesis must take a stand. In other words, it must be debatable. A good argumentative thesis states a proposition that at least some people will object to. Okay, so you're going out on a limb. You're taking a stand. You're saying, "Hey, this is the way things should be or should not be." So you can't be afraid to go out on that limb. Consider the following thesis statement. Education is the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. This thesis statement presents ideas that some people might take issue with. It says that increased drug use is a problem among teenagers. Yes, it does. Whether you believe it or not, that's what this thesis statement says. It doesn't mean that it's true or untrue. It's what this argument is about. That more than one possible solution to the problem exists. There may be only one solution. There may be 15 solutions. There may be 1,000,000 solutions. But it's stating there are more than one way. Okay, and that education is a better solution than any other. So it's taking a stand. It's going out on a limb and saying this is what this argument is for or against. Okay, argumentative essay will go on to support each of these 3 points logically and persuasively. Okay, pretty cut and dry there. A good way to test the stability of your thesis for an argumentative essay is to formulate an antithesis, a statement that asserts the opposite position. If you think that some people will support the antithesis, you can be certain your thesis is actually debatable. This is a great test. Okay, could it be reversed? Could I argue the other way? If I argue the other way, is there more evidence that way? So a thesis being education is the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. Antithesis being education is not the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. And again, that's pretty cut and dry. It's the opposite. Analyzing your audience. You have to know your audience. Okay, that's what these next 3 paragraphs are about. It's just understanding your audience, understanding who's going to be skeptical, who's going to be not. In the case of my class, then you know the audience is me. Okay, I'm not basing the merits of a paper off of whether or not I agree or disagree with your argument. That's not the point. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to recognize good writing, correct bad writing, and help you write papers effectively in your college careers to come. That's my job. If you're doing that, you're writing effectively, and your argument is sound, you have a good thesis, it doesn't matter if I personally agree with it or not. And the opposite is true if you have a bad paper and you have a bad thesis and a bad structure and you didn't outline like I told you, but I personally believe in what you're writing. It doesn't mean that you're going to get a good grade. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to impose my views on anyone. I'm here to help you in your college writing career from this day forward. So, analyzing your audience. If you're in a sociology class or criminology class, you have to know in what realm is this paper. Who would be an audience for this paper? What other papers have been written that are like this? What kind of arguments have been made in this world, in this realm of sociology or criminology or something to that effect? What is the professor looking for here? If I have an indication of the professor goes this way or that way on a particular topic, I always tell the story of I took it was a December semester, 2 weeks. It might have only been a week actually of criminal law at KSU, and I knew that the professor thought a certain way about a case. Our final paper was to write about that case. I actually wrote about the opposite of what I knew he thought. Right? I took a chance on that, hoping that he would recognize, I don't agree with him, but he makes a good argument here. Okay, I could have gone, I can't remember what I got, maybe a B or something, but I could have gone the other way and maybe got an A if I agree with him. But you got to know your audience. For me, it's real vanilla over here because either your paper is good writing or it's bad writing. And if it's bad writing, I'll work with you. We'll fix it. If it's good writing, if it's an argument that I don't necessarily believe in, I don't really care. That's not what I'm here for. So know your audience. Gathering and documenting evidence. There are different ways to go about writing a paper. In my English 1101 class, I talk about different strategies. You have to find the strategies that work for you. Just like you have to figure out how you learn best. Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a tactile learner? You have to touch things or you have to see them in action before you can do them. Just like when you're learning things, it's also important that you know how you tackle a essay or a research paper for your college classes so that when they come about, you're not reinventing the way you do them every time, okay? One tactic, and I don't recommend this for everyone, but one tactic is you do the research first, okay? In the middle of the research, you come up with a tentative thesis statement. Which stand am I taking? Because I've done some research here. I kind of know which side I'm going to land on this thing. And here's my tentative thesis statement. I jot it down, and I continue on with my research. I find 4 or 5 good quotes that would support that tentative thesis. I find some articles, some things that I can pull from, some data, and then I write the paper. And in writing the paper, I'm introducing the argument, I'm providing my stance on the argument, then I'm backing up the argument with the research that I found. I'm introducing the research, I'm analyzing the research, either before or after I'm directly quoting or paraphrasing the research, providing the analysis, all right? And then I'm transitioning to the next group of research or the next quote that I'm using, okay? So your paper, basically, you're going back and forth in between, and you have some organizational structure that you've done in the outline beforehand, after you've done the research, okay? You can do it that way, or you can do the outline first and then go do the research. But for most of your papers, especially in the social sciences or humanities, it's really good to find the research first and then write the paper. That may not work for you. You may try that and be like, I wrote a terrible paper doing it that way. It doesn't work for everyone. That's one way that I write a paper. Some papers, I just start writing and then I go back it up later because I can just go. That may not be an option for you just starting out. Okay, so just something to think about. As you gather and document evidence and assess its effectiveness, keep in mind evidence as an argumentative essay never proves anything conclusively. No, you're not trying to conclude without a doubt. If it did, there would be no debate and no point in arguing. Okay? The best the evidence can do is convince your audience that an assertion is reasonable and worth considering. Okay, I want to go back to that, and hence no point in arguing. If you write an essay where your thesis says killing people is bad, it's really hard to refute the opposite. Okay? So there would be that's not a really good thesis statement. There's actually no point in arguing that. You're not going to find very much evidence that would suggest otherwise. Okay? I know this is a very broad, kind of weird statement, but I try to give an example of or drugs are bad, or school is important. These aren't very good thesis statements because they're not dynamic enough. You can't really argue the other way. Children shouldn't be left home alone. Okay, got it. You're not going to really find a lot of people that would suggest that they should be left home alone at 3 years of age or something. So you can't really write a thesis statement or let alone an argumentative essay based on that. All right, kinds of evidence. Evidence can be fact or opinion. Oh my goodness. Evidence can be fact or opinion. Facts are statements that people generally agree are true and that can be verified independently. You can provide examples of. And then facts are also accompanied by opinions, judgments, or beliefs that are not substantiated by proof. Opinions do not carry the same weight as facts, but they can be quite persuasive. Okay, you can bring out some persuasion in your essay, but it can't be your entire essay. Okay. You could then make this statement more persuasive by supporting it with an expert opinion. For example, by saying that David Zuby, the chief researcher at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, believes crash avoidance systems should be standard equipment for all automobiles. That's an expert's opinion. It's more valuable than your opinion, the non-expert, because he's the chief researcher at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. All right. Not all opinions are equally convincing. The opinions of experts are more convincing than are those of individuals who have limited knowledge of an issue. Your personal opinions can be evidence, provided you are knowledgeable about your subject. Okay. By providing some kind of anecdotal evidence, like anecdote meaning story. Something happened to you, therefore this has to be true. Okay, but you have to know its worth, right, if you're going to talk about it. Your whole paper can't be based just on that. In the final analysis, what is important is not just the quality of the evidence, but also the credibility or believability of the person offering it. It's not just about the evidence, it's also about the person who's giving it. What kind of evidence might change readers' mind? That depends on the readers, the issue, and the fact at hand. Put yourself in the place of your readers and ask what would make them receptive. What would make them receptive to your thesis? It goes back to analyzing your audience. Okay, criteria for evidence. Your evidence should be relevant. If you're using data from 1975 to declare that smartphones are awesome, that's not relevant. You should be using data from the last 8 years, 10 years, probably 5 years, if you're talking about something so current. Your evidence should be representative. It should represent the full range of opinions about your subject, not just one side. For example, in an essay arguing against the use of animals in medical experimentation, you would not just use information provided by animal rights activists. You would also use information supplied by medical researchers, pharmaceutical companies, and medical ethicists. Okay, so it's not just, you want to be able to broaden where the evidence came from. Your evidence should be sufficient. It should include enough facts, opinions, and examples to support your claims. The amount of evidence you need depends on the length of your essay, your audience, and your thesis. It stands to reason that you would use fewer examples in a 2-page essay than in a 10-page essay. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. Documentation of evidence. You can use your own ideas and observations to support your claims. Most of the time, however, you will have to use the print and electronic source of the library and search the internet to locate the information you need. We'll get more into MLA and doing research at some point this week and next, but Galileo is an excellent resource, and I'll go through a on-screen tutorial of how to use Galileo properly about the same time that it'll be next week when I do the MLA, how to do that properly. Okay, you can't plagiarize, meaning presenting the words or ideas of others as if they're your own, unless they're common knowledge. All right. Documentation gives readers the ability to evaluate the sources you cite and to consult them if they wish. This is referring to MLA citation, APA citation. Okay, those are the ones you're going to be using most in your undergraduate. All right. The part that I like the best is dealing with the opposition, because this is usually 1/4 or 1/3 of my paper, is dealing with the opposition. So I've made a claim, I've stuck my neck out, and now I'm going to talk about the opposite opinions, the opposing opinions. Okay, and this is where you can get clever if you go against your actual personal views. Then when it comes to recognizing the opposing positions, you kind of have a leg up a little bit, because for some of you it would be hard to recognize the opposing positions. It's really, really powerful. It's really powerful to use opposing positions in your essays. So you're recognizing what the other side is talking about. You're recognizing that there are differing opinions on this subject matter, and then you're smashing it right there in front of everybody in your essay. You're refuting it. You're saying, this is why this is wrong. Here's more evidence. as to why. I've recognized this. I've set them up for failure. I've set them up, and now I'm going to go ahead and smash it right there. Okay? You should concede its strength. Admit that it is valid. It's really good. It's so powerful. Okay. Understanding understanding that not all arguments should be confrontational. Not all of them have to be with so much fire. Okay, they can be just plain Jane. You're just citing the evidence. You're doing the thing there. You're not bringing a whole lot of emotion to it. That's fine. It doesn't have to be so controversial. Not every, I might have got you fired up here, right? Not every argumentative essay has to be ridiculously controversial. And you should think that those who disagree with you as colleagues, not adversaries. Okay, in today's society, we tend to be a little confrontational, a little adversarial. All right, and in some cases it does you disservice because you're going so hard one way that you're making it seem like there's no other way. Like, whoever believes the opposite of this is not even human. You see that a lot in the news right now. If someone disagrees with this, then shame on them. They're a terrible, awful, evil person. Right? They're evil. How do you define evil? Because they are against your opinion. Like, that's kind of tough. So it's page 524 in chapter 14 talks about that, understanding Rogerian argument, and understanding that you need to think of those who disagree with you as colleagues, not necessarily adversaries, and going too hard, going too overboard with it without it ends up getting a little more emotional than it should. All right, using deductive and inductive arguments. In an argument, you move from evidence to a conclusion in two ways. One method, called deductive reasoning, proceeds from general premise or assumption to a specific conclusion. Okay, so you're generalizing, you're putting pieces together, and then you're going to a specific conclusion. Deduction is what most people mean when they speak of logic. Using strict logical form, deduction holds that if all the statements in an argument are true, the conclusion must also be true. The conclusion, meaning your thesis, must also be true. The other method of moving from evidence to conclusion is called inductive reasoning. Induction proceeds from individual observations to a more general conclusion and uses no strict form. It requires that only that all the relevant evidence be stated and that the conclusion fit the evidence better than any other conclusion would. So it's a little more loosey-goosey. It's a little more loose there. It's bringing these generalized statements and then saying, hey, this is the only way that it could come together. Most written arguments use a combination of these two. It's not necessary that you say, well, I'm using inductive reasoning here, obviously, or I'm afraid I might be using too much inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. That's not that important. It's just important that you have some kind of structure and that you're marching towards some kind of banner. Okay, using deductive arguments, if you look at the examples, they're pretty good at explaining it. All Olympic runners are fast. Minor premise is Jesse Owens was an Olympic runner. Conclusion, therefore, Jesse Owens runs fast. It's pretty cut and dry. A plus B equals C kind of stuff there. Okay. Let's go to using inductive arguments. These examples on the next page. Question, how did that living room window get broken? Evidence, there's a baseball on the living room floor. The baseball was not there this morning. Some children were playing baseball this afternoon. They were playing in the vacant lot across the window. They stopped playing a little while ago. They aren't the vacant lot now. Conclusion, one of the children hit or threw the ball through the window, then they all ran away. That's pretty cut and dry. It talks about if you have a gap down there, you could have what's called an inductive leap. A strength of the imagination enables you to draw a sound conclusion, and that was given there. You didn't see the baseball go through the window, so but you can induce that that's what occurred. Okay. You don't want your conclusion to not be supported by facts. This well-named error is called jumping to a conclusion because it amounts to a premature inductive leap. You can avoid reaching an unjustified or false conclusion by making sure you have collected enough evidence to justify your conclusion. Okay. There's different strategies here. All right. Using logic, recognizing fallacies, begging the question, argument from analogy. Okay, analogy being if this, then that. Personal attack. You should probably, recognize that that's if you're trying to refute an argument, for example, and you say that's only a personal attack and here's why, here's the evidence supporting that. Okay. Talks about jumping to conclusion, false dilemma, equivocation. This fallacy occurs when the meaning of a key term changes at some point in an argument. Equivocation makes it seem as if a conclusion follows from premises when it actually does not. As a human endeavor, it gives an example. As a human endeavor, computers are a praiseworthy and even remarkable accomplishment, but how human can we hope to be if we rely on computers to make our decisions? The use of human in the first sentence refers to the entire human race. In the second sentence, human means merciful or civilized. See what I'm saying? So it's not... By subtly shifting this term to refer to qualities, characteristics of people as opposed to machines, the writer makes the argument seem more sound than it is. Okay, so it's just a way to stretch the words a little bit. Okay, it just has all these different wonderful tactics here. Some you already know that you didn't know, that you didn't understand that you knew, or you didn't know the official name to. There's really good tactics here. You can't use them all. Okay, I just want to stress that. I'm not reading them all because you can't use them all in one paper necessarily. Okay, you may not realize that you're using them either, but just get a sense of what they are in the middle of this chapter here. Using transitions. All right, so it's important to go from one part to another smoothly. So without these words and phrases, readers could easily lose track of your argument. Okay, so it has some... Please don't use in conclusion or in other words. It's just not necessary. Those are kind of no-nos in my book, but there's another transition on page 55, so you do want it to kind of come together. All right, this next part you need to read yourself. Structuring an argumentative essay. This needs to be studied because we're going to write argumentative essays, and one of them is going to be your big research paper for this semester. So I highly recommend that you read this part, structuring an argumentative essay. And then it has some examples and stuff like that as it goes. And then your reading really begins on page 544, one of the most famous argumentative essays of all time, the Declaration of Independence, right? And it's not that long, okay? Not at all. May not understand every word of it, but that's fine. The obligation to endure is another good. You can see some of these tactics in action, okay? This is what I've assigned to you is chapter 14. It seems like it's a lot, but I just went over most of the first part of it, and then you just study what an argumentative essay consists of, and then you just read them. Read them with the understanding that you're going to write some. The letter from Birmingham jail is lengthy, and it will take you some time to read, but it's totally worth it. Public universities should be free. I highly recommend you read that one. These aren't terribly long. The case against free college. Okay, that's the opposite. All right, why does it pay to study the humanities? Kind of a debate. It's interesting. All right, and then the chapter ends. It's majoring in liberal arts is a mistake for students. That's a really good one too. So your goal for this week is to read all of these in chapter 14 and have a good understanding. I'm not asking you to memorize these essays or anything like that, but take a look at them. You don't need to memorize any characters or anything. Some of this stuff we're going to go over again later as we go deeper into there. Okay, and then really the chapter ends after there's a reason they choose schools. Okay, and there's some very good, some of this stuff might lead to some heated debate in your in your households or get you hot and heavy. I can't believe they wrote that. Again, it's not because I have some kind of ulterior motive or I believe a certain way or whatever. It's just I need you to understand what our good argumentative essays look like. The best way for you to be a better writer is to be a better reader and to do it more often. Okay, so I'm going to assign you things to read, and then at some point or another, you're going to find out. I'm going to find out whether or not you've read them. Also, I'm going to just have a little. I've assigned a lot of reading this week, so I'm going to have a little assignment on sentence structure. It's kind of a fun assignment, really. It's not going to take you very long to do. I'm just going to ask you to rewrite some bad sentences. So, and then as we go, you also have, not for this week, this week your job is to read chapter 14 mostly. I'm going to have one small assignment there. You're just reading chapter 14, watching this video, reading chapter 14, and then but for next week, you're going to be reading Hard Brace Essentials, the entire MLA section. Okay, in Hard Brace Essentials, they have an MLA section. In this, I'm not asking you to read it and memorize it and take notes necessarily. I just want you to have an understanding of what MLA is, what it's used for. Look at the examples. Take good. And this is in the Hard Brace Essentials one. So hopefully you got something out of this argumentative essay. Look, one of our biggest assignments this semester is going to be an argumentative essay turned research paper. So I highly recommend that you take the time, read over chapter 14. It's going to help you so much. I wish I could give all my hints away, but it's going to help you so much if you just read those essays in chapter 14 as we go ahead. The only way you can be a better writer is to be a better reader. That and taking this class, of course, but I'm going to make you read stuff, and chapter 14 is it for this week. Hope you have a good week. Again, I have extended last week's assignment, so because some of you weren't able to see the video, but I look forward to reconvening with you next week. All right, have a good one.